The sky turned crimson and the ground roared beneath me. From 200 feet above the flames, I saw them, 43 people waving through the smoke. Alarms screamed, fuel almost gone. I could turn back, but if I did, they'd die. I pushed the throttle forward and whispered, "Not today. Not while I'm still alive." My name is Captain Maria Santos, fighter pilot of the Philippine Air Force. After 7 years in the sky, I asked for leave to remember what peace felt like. I came to San Cristobal, a quiet coastal town beneath the sleeping volcano Mayan. At first, it was paradise. Blue water, roasted coffee, children laughing on the pier. But peace doesn't last long for people like me. By the third day, the sea felt warmer. The ground trembled under my chair. The birds were gone. I asked the cafe owner, "Have you noticed the water's getting hotter?" He laughed. "Maybe because you're from the tropics, sweetheart. Everything feels hot to you." A man nearby added, "Let her be. Asian tourists love drama." Their laughter stung. I smiled, pretending not to care. I'd heard worse. Same tone, different words. In the military, on missions abroad, people always doubted what they didn't understand. That evening, I set a small seismic sensor near the pier. Old equipment, but still reliable. The data came fast. Pressure rising, gas activity high. I froze. Mayan wasn't sleeping. It was holding its breath. I sent the readings to the National Monitoring Center, asking for confirmation. The reply came cold. Minor seismic movement. No cause for alarm. No cause for alarm. I'd heard that before, right before a mudslide swallowed a whole village. Next morning, the sulfur smell thickened. Fishermen joked that the sea was boiling because of my foreign luck. One man spat into the water and said, "You people always think you know better." I wanted to yell, to shake them awake, but their eyes were full of disbelief. A woman whispered, "She talks like she's in charge." Another chuckled, "Maybe she's writing a movie." I walked away. My boots sank into hot sand. The sky dimmed behind the mountain, and I saw a faint red shimmer at its peak. The air vibrated, gentle but steady, like a warning heartbeat. I opened my notebook, drew the ridges, the roads, the escape paths. My hands trembled slightly. I wasn't supposed to be working. I was supposed to be healing. But instinct had already taken over. Back in my small hotel room, the lamp flickered with every tremor. I checked the readings again. Stronger. Closer. I called the local line, left a message no one would hear. When I stepped onto the balcony, the first thin veil of ash was already falling. It looked like snow, but it burned when it touched my skin. Down the street, people still laughed in the bars. Music played. Life continued. I whispered to myself, if I wait for permission, they'll all die. And in that quiet moment, I realized my vacation was over. The soldier in me had just woken up. The tremor struck without warning. The cafe windows shattered, people screamed, cups fell, and the ground growled beneath us. I didn't think. Training took over. I threw the table aside and pulled a child from under a broken beam. She cried against my shoulder, her tiny hands trembling. Dust filled the air. I looked around. People were frozen, shocked, waiting for someone else to tell them what to do. I handed the girl to her mother and ran. The air outside was hot, vibrating. My phone buzzed in my pocket, readings spiking. It was happening. I sprinted toward the radio station at the center of town. Inside, Chaos. Phones ringing. People arguing. The floor still shaking. A man turned as I burst through the door. "Carlos Rivera?" I asked, breathless. He nodded, cautious. "Who are you?" "We need to broadcast an emergency alert," I said. "Mount Mayan is about to erupt." He blinked, confused, then frowned. "Hold on, what? Who are you to say that? Are you a tourist?" I reached into my jacket and pulled out my ID. "Captain Maria Santos, Philippine Air Force, Disaster Response Division." His expression darkened. "Philippine? This is U.S. territory. You have no authority here." I met his stare. "Disasters don't care about borders, Mr. Rivera. They don't need a passport to kill." Behind him, a technician laughed, leaning back in his chair. "Maybe you should call Hollywood, lady. They love lines like that." I ignored him. I connected my laptop to their monitor, pulling up the data, the maps I'd worked on all night. "Look at this. The pressure readings. The gas spread. If we don't start evacuation within 6 hours, the town will burn." Carlos hesitated. His hand hovered over the keyboard. "If you're wrong," he said slowly, "people will panic. And if you're right," he sighed, "they'll still hate you for it." I felt a sharp ache in my chest, familiar and dull. "I'm used to that," I said quietly. He studied me, still uncertain, but the room shook again, stronger this time. A clock fell from the wall. Someone shouted from outside. I pointed at the screen. "You see that? The epicenter's shifting. We're out of time." Carlos rubbed his face, defeated. "You're serious about this?" "I don't joke about fire," I said. He nodded reluctantly. "Fine. You'll speak live. I'll get you on air in 2 minutes." The technician muttered, "Can't wait to see the town laugh at this." I turned to him. "They can laugh later if they're still alive." He looked away. The station fell silent except for the hum of the generator. I could hear my own heartbeat. As Carlos adjusted the microphone, he whispered, "You really think you can save them?" I breathed in the smell of dust and ozone. "No," I said, "but I can try." When the red light flickered on, I closed my eyes and began to speak. My voice steadied itself, even as the ground continued to tremble beneath us. "Attention, residents of San Cristobal." Carlos led me through the corridor of the town hall. The air smelled of paper and fear. People moved like ghosts, clutching files, whispering under their breath. When we entered the mayor's office, Ricardo Valdez was waiting. Perfect suit, calm voice, eyes that had seen too much bureaucracy to be moved by urgency. He didn't stand to greet me. He folded his arms and said, "We've already received a low-level alert from the National Center. There's no need to stir up panic." I forced my voice to stay even. "Sir, that alert is outdated. The pressure readings have risen 40% in the last 3 hours. The gas emissions are critical." He raised an eyebrow. "And how exactly do you know this?" I opened my laptop and turned the screen toward him. Satellite images, chemical graphs, the trembling red line of seismic data. "Because I've been monitoring it myself. I was trained for this." A man standing by the window, his advisor, sharp suit, sharper tongue, leaned closer to whisper, not quite softly enough. "Since when do we take science lessons from a brown-skinned tourist?" The words cut through me like glass. I turned to him. "You can question my accent, my color, my uniform, but not the facts. In 6 hours, this town will be ash." The mayor's gaze hardened. "You're not a representative of any U.S. agency. Who takes responsibility if you're wrong?" I placed my hand flat on his desk. The wood was cold beneath my palm. "No one. Just me. Because when it comes to saving lives, Rank and borders mean nothing." The advisor laughed quietly. "She's dramatic, I'll give her that." Carlos snapped, his voice louder than I'd ever heard it. "She saved a child from a collapsing building an hour ago. Maybe start listening before we lose more." The mayor glanced at him, then back at me. "Captain, what exactly are you asking me to do?" "Declare a state of emergency," I said. "Evacuate the town. Every hour we wait means fewer people make it out alive." He tapped his fingers on the table. "And if you're wrong, Captain Santos, you'll cause chaos. You'll destroy businesses, homes, livelihoods." I met his eyes. "If I'm wrong, you can rebuild. If I'm right and you do nothing, there will be nothing left to rebuild." Silence fell. Only the faint ticking of the wall clock filled the room. The mayor looked at the graphs again. The red lines flickered upward like warning flares. Then Carlos spoke softly, almost pleading. "Sir, listen to her. Dr. Patel from the clinic just confirmed several people are showing symptoms of gas exposure, SO2 poisoning." That changed something. The mayor's expression cracked just a little. His shoulders dropped. He reached for the pen on his desk. "Emergency evacuation?" he murmured. "Yes," I said. "Now." He hesitated, pen trembling above the paper. "If this turns out to be nothing," I interrupted him quietly, "then you can say you saved your people from nothing. But if you wait, you'll be signing something far worse than a decree." For a moment, he just stared at me. Then the pen met the page. His signature cut across the document like a final surrender. As we turned to leave, the advisor muttered, "She got lucky this time." I stopped at the doorway and looked back. "Luck has nothing to do with lava, sir." Outside, the tremors rolled again, deep and steady. I heard glass rattling somewhere down the corridor. Carlos exhaled beside me. "They still don't believe you," he said quietly. "They will," I answered, "when the ground starts to move under their own feet." And as we stepped out into the gray light, I felt it again. That thin, bitter mix of victory and disbelief. They hadn't trusted me because I was right. They'd trusted me because the earth itself had started to roar. I divided the evacuation routes with Carlos and Father Miguel. Trucks would move toward the harbor. Motorbikes and ATVs would take the narrow southern trail. The ambulance crews would handle the elderly and children. Orders flowed from my mouth faster than I could think. People ran, shouted, gathered belongings. Through the noise, I still heard it. The low hum of disbelief. Two men loading boxes near the trucks muttered just loud enough for me to hear. "I've never seen a woman giving orders here. Probably just lucky she got the mayor's ear." I pretended not to notice. I'd learned silence could be sharper than argument. Still, their words lodged deep, somewhere between my ribs and my pride. The mountains smoked now, a gray column twisting upward. Every breath tasted like metal. I pointed toward the ridge and shouted, "Keep moving! Don't stop for anything!" Another man called out from the crowd, his voice full of anger. "You just want to prove yourself. What do you know about this place? About us?" I walked straight to him. My voice stayed low, steady. "I don't know your town," I said. "But I know lava, and it doesn't care who you are." He looked away first. That was enough. As the convoys began to roll, the first tremor hit, short, sharp, like a warning knock from the earth. Dust fell from the church roof where Father Miguel was organizing families. Children cried, but the priest's calm voice cut through the fear. Carlos came running toward me, radio in hand. "The southern group's clear," he said. The trucks are leaving the square, but there's a problem. What problem? I asked. He caught his breath. A landslide hit the northern road. 40 workers are trapped at the mining site. The rescue team can't reach them. For a second, everything around me slowed. The shouting, the engines, even the heartbeat of the ground. Father Miguel heard it too. He turned to me, his eyes heavy. "No one's going back up there now," he said quietly. "Not in this storm." I looked at the smoke rising from Mayan's peak, darker now, trembling with fire. I thought of those 40 people, faces I didn't know, names I would never learn. "No one?" I repeated. "Then I will." Carlos shook his head. "Maria, that road's gone. You can't—" "I can," I said, "and I will." The priest touched my arm. "If you go, you might not return." I met his gaze. "If I don't go, they won't either." He nodded slowly, as if giving a silent blessing. I turned toward the radio van. My voiceover echoed inside me like a prayer. They doubt me because I'm a woman, because I'm foreign, because I don't fit their idea of a savior. But the fire doesn't care about any of that, and neither do I. The last truck pulled away from the square. The sirens faded into the distance. Behind me, the sky above Mount Mayan glowed a violent red. I tightened the strap of my flight bag and whispered to myself, "Time to earn their trust the only way they'll understand, by flying straight into the fire." The line rang twice before someone answered. I forced my voice calm, even though my chest felt like a drum. "Colonel Reyes," I said, "I need permission to use the F-16 at Legazpi Airfield." Silence swallowed the space between us. Then his voice, older, tired, clipped. "Maria, are you out of your mind? You are off duty. That bird is not cleared for flight." I did not explain fear. I explained need. "If I do not go, people will die." A long breath. A low curse. "You know what that means. You go and you are risking court-martial." "Then court-martial me later," I said. "Give me the plane now." He was quiet. For a moment, I heard his own memories. "Santos," he said finally, voice softer. "You always did have stubborn hands." "I do," I replied. "And they are not for folding." "Go," he said, "and come back alive." I hung up with my hands shaking. It was not triumph. It was permission. It was an order wrapped in worry. I drove to the airfield through streets that smelled of dust and burnt coffee. Sirens echoed, but not many moved fast enough. People watched as if waiting for something to prove them right or wrong. At the gate, a mechanic blocked my path. He looked at my ID, then at me, then back at the hangar. "You really think you can save anyone with that thing?" he said, voice full of doubt. "It is a fighter, not a rescue chopper." Another tech laughed behind him. "She wants to save the world with a play toy." They heard my answer. I kept it short. "It will be enough." They did not believe me. Some of the men muttered about rules and red tape. Some muttered about bravery or foolishness. One of them, younger, stepped forward. "At least she tries," he said. "Better than standing and shouting." His words landed like a small, warm stone. It did not change their faces, but it shifted the air. I climbed into the flight suit that smelled of oil and old missions. The fabric was scratchy, familiar. I pulled the zipper up with fingers that refused to tremble. I strapped on the helmet and looked up at the sky. It was the color of old blood. It was the color of decisions. I remembered the wars, the nights we flew through flak and fire. I remembered the faces that did not get to come home. I had flown to protect lines, to break blockades, to carry people to safety. This was not an aerial parade. This was not a sanctioned sortie. This was a promise. A ground crew chief leaned in close as she checked the instruments. "You sure about this, Captain?" she asked. Her face was open now, not mockery, not disbelief, just worry. "If I am not sure," I said, "I would not be sitting in this cockpit." She nodded and tapped the console. "All right then. Let's make sure you come back." The engines coughed to life like tired beasts being roused. The hangar doors opened to a sky I had loved and feared in equal measure. As the plane rolled forward, I felt the weight of judgments and hopes press at my back. One of the mechanics shouted as we taxied, partly to be heard over the roar, "Bring them home, Captain!" I smiled, though the smile did not reach my eyes. "I will," I answered. I thought briefly of the men who called me foolish, of the colonel who feared paperwork more than lives, of the priest who blessed my shoulders and said a prayer I never heard but felt. I thought of the miners trapped in the dark and of a child whose small hand had fit into mine that morning. I set my hands on the controls. The world narrowed to the hum of engines and the feel of the stick under my palms. I had flown for many reasons. Today, the reason was simple. I had flown for life. I lifted off into a sky that no longer looked like sky. The air was fire and dust, a storm of ash that clawed at the wings. Warnings blinked red across my cockpit, but I tuned them out. I had one task: to keep those people alive. From above, I saw the mine road twisting like a dying vein, magma swallowing it inch by inch. The convoy of ATVs was nothing but flickers of light under clouds of smoke. I steadied the jet and called through the radio. "Carlos, give me their signal." Static hissed. Then his voice, rough and urgent. "They're moving, Maria, but the smoke's too thick. We're losing them." I dropped altitude, 2,000 feet. The turbulence hit like a fist, shaking everything that held me together. Radar picked up faint shapes ahead, the convoy, crawling through chaos. I adjusted course, guiding them with short bursts of light. "Keep your line," I said into the mic. "Follow the ridge curve to the west. Don't stop, no matter what you see." One of the signals on my screen stopped moving. Then another. I zoomed in. A vehicle stalled, trapped in a pit of ash. My jaw tightened. "Carlos, who's at the tail?" "Mechanic named Diego," he answered. "Engine failure. They're stuck." I dropped to 200 feet, lower than any sane pilot should. The ground blurred, molten red beneath me. My jet screamed as the heat sensors spiked. The air became thick with debris, the smell of sulfur cutting through the cockpit. I opened the throttle, created a rush of wind that blasted the ash aside. Through the radio, I heard coughing, then Diego's voice breaking through. "It's clearing! I can see again!" "Then move!" I shouted. "Now!" The warning lights flashed crimson. Engine temperature critical. "I said move, damn it!" The ATV roared back to life. A cheer broke through the static. I felt something break inside me. Relief mixed with pain. "Keep going," I told them. "I'll cover your route." Ahead lay the old wooden bridge, their last path across the ravine. I could barely see it through the haze. I aimed the targeting laser and drew a thin red line over the planks I knew were solid. "Follow the beam," I said. "Do not deviate. Not 1 inch." The first rider crossed, the second followed. Then the rest, engines howling, shadows swallowed by smoke. I counted each heartbeat, each crossing. When the last one reached the other side, the bridge gave way. It fell in silence, swallowed by the lava beneath. I let out the breath I'd been holding. They made it, I whispered. All of them made it. My cockpit alarms shrieked again, louder, angrier. The engine temperature had reached its limit. I could smell the metal burning, but I stayed low, circling once more, refusing to climb until I was sure they were clear. Carlos's voice finally came through, softer now. Maria, they're out. They're safe. I leaned back, exhausted. Copy that, I said quietly. Mission complete. The horizon pulsed orange as the volcano roared, but for the first time that night, I felt peace. I looked down at the trembling line of survivors, still moving under the dying light, and thought, they'll never know what it took. And that's okay. I pushed the throttle forward, climbing into the ash-dark sky. Behind me, the bridge was gone. But the living were still moving, and that was enough. The jet trembled beneath me as I turned it toward Legazpi. The lights on the panel blinked like dying stars. Fuel, 2%. Landing gear, error. Every alarm screamed at once, but I stayed calm. I'd faced missiles before. Now I was fighting gravity. Legazpi Tower, this is Captain Santos, I said, voice rough. Request emergency landing clearance. Critical systems failure. Copy, Captain, the tower replied. Runway 3 is clear. Fire crews ready. The volcano's glow reflected off the canopy like blood. I adjusted the controls, coaxing the F-16 through the turbulence. The metal groaned. The jet felt alive, stubborn, wounded. I whispered, hold together, girl, just a little longer. When the runway came into sight, I lowered the gear. The warning light stayed red. I tried again. Nothing. My pulse thundered. I had one chance. I locked the harness, cut power, and aligned for descent. The moment the wheels hit the ground, the jet screamed. Sparks exploded across the tarmac. I felt the left gear collapse, the metal grind. Fire bloomed under the wings, crawling up the sides. I kept her straight until we slid to a stop. Then silence, broken only by the hiss of burning fuel. I opened the hatch. Smoke hit me like a wave. My legs were shaking, but they moved anyway. I climbed down and stepped onto the scorched asphalt. Voices shouted. Shapes ran toward me. Firefighters, mechanics, soldiers. Someone yelled, "She made it down!" Another shouted, "Get the extinguishers here!" Through the chaos, I heard disbelief turn to awe. A man I'd seen mocking me earlier stood frozen. "She actually did it," he said, almost to himself. They surrounded me, faces streaked with soot. A young engineer stared up at me, wide-eyed. "You brought that jet back from hell." A woman pushed through the crowd, the same one who had laughed at the cafe. Her voice shook. "I'm sorry for not believing you." I looked at her, the heat still radiating from the wreck behind me. "It's all right," I said quietly. I didn't fly to be believed. I flew to save lives. For a moment, no one spoke. Then applause broke out. Uneven, raw, real. Carlos appeared, his radio still in hand. His eyes were red. "They're all safe," he said. "Every last one." I nodded, too tired to answer. The words hit me like air after drowning. I looked toward the horizon, San Cristobal hidden under clouds of ash, but still alive. Mechanics examined the F-16, shaking their heads. "She's finished," one said softly, "but she brought her pilot home." I smiled faintly. That's all she had to do. The firefighters doused the last of the flames. The air smelled of metal and relief. Around me, the same people who had doubted me now watched in silence. Some ashamed, some grateful. None of it mattered anymore. I sank to the ground beside the wing, feeling the heat seep through the fabric of my flight suit. My body trembled, but inside me, something settled. I had given everything, and it had been enough. A medic knelt beside me. "Captain, you need rest." I shook my head. Later, I looked up at the fading glow of the volcano. "First tell me, how many did we save?" 320, he said. The number filled the air between us. I closed my eyes, and for the first time that day, I let myself breathe. Around me, voices softened. The crowd began to disperse, leaving the wreckage gleaming faintly under the emergency lights. I stayed there a while longer, watching the smoke drift upward into the night. They would write reports, give interviews, tell stories. But none of that would capture the truth. The fear, the noise, the moment when the world held its breath. I wasn't thinking of medals or headlines. I was thinking of the people walking on solid ground again, of the sound of a child's laughter somewhere beyond the ash. And as the engines cooled behind me, I whispered to the sky, "We made it." 3 days later, San Cristobal was unrecognizable. The harbor was covered in ash. The houses stood like ghosts, silent, gray, half buried. The mountain still smoked in the distance, but its roar had quieted to a whisper. The town had survived. Barely. From a small radio on the pier, Carlos's voice carried through the wind. "A female pilot saved 320 people," he said. His tone was steady, proud. "She asked for no reward, no recognition, only the chance to do what was right." I closed my eyes and listened. The sound of the waves broke against the silence that had filled the world since the eruption. His words drifted through the air like something sacred, carried by the same wind that once smelled of smoke and sulfur. I stood at the edge of the sea, barefoot on blackened sand. The water lapped at my ankles, cold and heavy with ash. I opened my journal. The pages warped from heat and dust. The pen trembled slightly in my hand, not from exhaustion, but from the weight of what remained. I wrote slowly, letting each word settle. Courage is not when they believe in you. It's when you still do what's right, even when they don't. The ink bled on the paper, spreading like the truth, simple, irreversible. I looked up. The sun was setting behind the horizon, staining the sea with gold and fire. For a moment, the color of the sky looked like the first flare of the volcano, but softer, forgiving. Behind me, the sound of the radio faded. Carlos was finishing his broadcast. "They said she was reckless," he read. "They said she was lucky, but I think she was both and more. She was brave." I smiled faintly, closing the notebook. The world didn't need to know my name. The faces of the people walking through the ruins were enough. The miners reunited with their families. The child I had pulled from the cafe. The woman who had once laughed at me now, carrying water to the shelter. They were my proof, my medal, my peace. The wind picked up, lifting strands of my hair across my face. It smelled of salt now, not ash. I took a long breath and whispered to the horizon, not for anyone to hear. "I came here a stranger. I leave as the wind that carried them out of hell. I turned from the sea and began to walk down the shore. Each step left a mark that the tide quickly erased. I didn't look back. The mountain stood behind me, silent, defeated. But in its shadow, life had begun again. Maybe that was the meaning of flight, I thought. Not glory, not medals, just the quiet certainty that even when the world burns, someone will rise into the smoke, simply because they must. The sky deepened to orange, then crimson, then night. The waves swallowed my footprints one by one, leaving nothing but the wind and the echo of my promise. I had flown to save them. But in the end, maybe it was they who saved me.